The emergency board meeting erupted in chaos as Victor Chen's voice cut through the mahogany-paneled boardroom like a blade. "Fire him immediately, Rebecca. This janitor has overstepped every boundary we have." Rebecca Martinez, CEO of Apex Engineering Solutions, stared at the security footage frozen on the wall-mounted screen. There, in grainy black and white, was Marcus Thompson in his gray maintenance uniform, hunched over her private computer terminal at 3 a.m, fingers flying across the keyboard. The timestamp read 48 hours ago. The same night, their revolutionary clean energy prototype had mysteriously begun functioning after months of failure. "He accessed classified files," Victor continued, his designer suit impeccable despite the late hour. "Corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property. We could face criminal charges if this gets out." Rebecca's throat felt tight as she watched the footage replay. Marcus had been their night janitor for 2 years, quiet and efficient, someone she barely noticed as he emptied trash bins and mopped floors. Yet there he was, navigating complex engineering software with the fluidity of someone who understood every line of code. "The Project Phoenix files were accessed for 47 minutes, added Sandra Williams, the board's security chair. "System logs show he modified critical algorithms in our fusion reactor design." Sandra's voice carried the sharp edge of someone who'd spent decades in corporate law, turning scandals into calculated damage control. Rebecca felt the familiar weight of leadership pressing down on her shoulders. At 34, she'd built Apex from a small consulting firm into a billion-dollar clean energy corporation, but she'd never faced anything quite like this. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from the early days. "Trust your instincts, Misha, but verify everything." The problem was, her instincts were screaming two completely different things. "Show me the modifications," she said quietly, ignoring the exasperated sighs from around the polished conference table. The technical display filled the screen, and Rebecca leaned forward, her MIT-trained mind automatically parsing the elegant equations. What she saw made her blood run cold, not with anger, but with recognition. The modifications weren't sabotage. They were brilliant. "Whoever made these changes," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "solved our heat dissipation problem. Look at the thermal coefficients." The room fell silent as the board members stared at calculations that might as well have been written in ancient Sanskrit. Rebecca's mind raced through the implications. For 8 months, her team of PhD engineers had struggled with the same issue. The fusion reaction generated too much heat, creating instability that threatened the entire system. These modifications, implemented with surgical precision, had solved it elegantly. "Rebecca," Victor's voice carried a warning tone, "whatever he did doesn't excuse corporate espionage. We have protocols, security clearances. He's a janitor, for God's sake." But Rebecca was already moving toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor with determined purpose. "Where are you going?" Sandra called after her. "To talk to him," Rebecca replied without turning around. "Before we destroy someone's life, I want to understand what really happened." Her security badge granted access to the employee files, and she pulled up Marcus Thompson's information on her phone as she rode the elevator down to the janitorial supply room. The basic facts stared back at her. Marcus Thompson, 36 years old, night shift maintenance worker, perfect attendance record over 2 years, emergency contact listed as Emma Thompson, daughter, age 7. The supply room was tucked away in the basement, a small windowless space filled with cleaning equipment and the faint scent of industrial soap. Marcus stood with his back to the door, methodically organizing bottles of floor cleaner with the same careful attention he brought to every task. He was tall and lean, with close-cropped graying hair and hands that moved with surprising gentleness for someone who spent his nights pushing heavy equipment. "Mr. Thompson," Rebecca said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned slowly, and she saw in his dark eyes the resignation of someone who'd been expecting this conversation. There was intelligence there, too, carefully hidden beneath layers of practiced invisibility. "Miss Martinez," he replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "I suppose you've seen the security footage." His accent carried the subtle inflections of someone who'd grown up bilingual, English layered over what sounded like Portuguese or Spanish. There was no defiance in his posture, no attempt to justify or deny what he'd done. "I've seen it," Rebecca confirmed, studying his face for any sign of deception. "The question is why? Why risk everything to access files that weren't meant for you?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to the concrete floor before meeting her eyes again. "My daughter Emma has been asking me about my work," he said finally. "She's 7, curious about everything, and she wanted to know what Daddy does all night while she's sleeping." He paused, running a hand over his hair in a gesture that spoke of profound weariness. "I told her I help keep the building clean and safe, which is true, but it's not the whole truth." Rebecca waited, sensing there was more to the story than a father trying to impress his child. Something in Marcus's demeanor suggested depths she'd never suspected in the quiet man who'd cleaned her office for 2 years. "I have a PhD in nuclear engineering from MIT, Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Graduated summa cum laude in 2015, dissertation on thermal dynamics in fusion reactor systems." The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She stared at this man she'd seen countless times, but never really noticed, trying to reconcile the janitor's uniform with the revelation of his credentials. "MIT," she repeated, her voice hollow. "You have a doctorate in nuclear engineering, and you're working as a janitor." It wasn't a question, but Marcus nodded anyway, his expression carrying the weight of circumstances Rebecca couldn't yet imagine. "Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan," he said simply. "I saw your team struggling with the heat dissipation issue, and I couldn't just stand by and watch. The solution was so clear to me, and Emma keeps asking if I'm helping make the world better. I wanted to be able to tell her yes." Rebecca felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew about the situation was crumbling, replaced by questions that made her head spin. Why didn't you apply for an engineering position? Why take a job you're completely overqualified for? The pain that flashed across Marcus's features was brief, but unmistakable. "I tried," he admitted. "After my wife died, Emma and I needed stability. Health insurance, predictable hours, a steady paycheck. Nobody wanted to hire someone with a gap in their employment history, someone who'd been out of the field caring for a sick spouse and raising a child alone." His voice caught slightly on the word spouse, and Rebecca realized she was seeing a man who'd sacrificed his career for love and family. "Your wife," she said gently. "What happened?" Marcus's shoulders sagged slightly, the careful composure he maintained threatening to crack. "Breast cancer," he replied, the words carrying the weight of memories too painful to fully share. "Diagnosed when Emma was 4. I took a leave of absence from my position at General Dynamics to care for her. Maria fought for 2 years, and I was with her every step of the way. When she died, Emma needed me more than ever. She'd lost her mother. I couldn't let work take her father away too." Rebecca's throat tightened as the full picture became clear. This wasn't corporate espionage or malicious intent. This was a brilliant engineer who'd chosen love over career advancement, who'd accepted invisible work to provide for his daughter, who'd finally reached a breaking point where his expertise couldn't remain hidden. The janitorial position offered health insurance that would cover Emma's asthma treatments, Marcus continued. Regular hours that let me take her to school and pick her up. It wasn't glamorous, but it was reliable. And honestly, after Maria died, I wasn't sure I had the emotional energy to return to high-stress engineering work. "But you've been watching our project," Rebecca observed. "Following our progress," Marcus nodded, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It's hard to turn off 15 years of training. When I'd empty the trash in the engineering wing, I'd see the whiteboards, the failed calculations, the frustration in everyone's faces. The thermal dynamics problem you were facing was identical to issues I'd worked on at General Dynamics." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not proud of accessing your system without permission, but I couldn't stand by and watch you struggle with something I knew how to fix." Rebecca stared at him, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. "The modifications you made, They're working. Our prototype has been stable for 48 hours straight. That's longer than we've ever achieved. Marcus's eyes lit up with genuine excitement, the first unguarded emotion she'd seen from him. The key was redistributing the thermal load through secondary cooling channels, he explained, his voice gaining confidence as he shifted into his area of expertise. Your original design concentrated heat in a single primary system, but fusion reactions generate temperature spikes that overwhelm any single cooling mechanism. By creating a cascade system with variable flow rates, you can manage the thermal dynamics much more effectively. Rebecca found herself nodding along, her own MIT training allowing her to follow his reasoning. This wasn't the voice of a janitor stumbling through concepts he barely understood. This was a peer, someone whose expertise might even exceed her own in certain areas. Your solution is elegant, she admitted. My team has been struggling with this problem for months, and you solved it in under an hour. Marcus's smile was both proud and sad. It's what I trained for, what I've spent my career thinking about. Those 2 years caring for Maria, I'd lie awake at night running thermal calculations in my head. It was the only way to quiet my mind when the fear and grief became overwhelming. He looked directly at Rebecca, and she saw in his eyes the unmistakable passion of someone who truly loved their work. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Rebecca turned to see Victor Chen striding toward them, his face flushed with anger. "Rebecca, what are you doing down here?" Security is waiting to escort him out of the building. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to having his orders followed without question. "Victor, wait," Rebecca said, stepping slightly between him and Marcus. "There's more to this situation than we initially understood." Victor's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, clearly displeased by Rebecca's apparent reluctance to handle what he considered a straightforward security breach. "I don't care if he had noble intentions," Victor snapped. "He violated every security protocol we have. The board voted unanimously to terminate him immediately and pursue criminal charges. This conversation ends now." Marcus straightened, accepting the inevitable with quiet dignity. "I understand," he said to Rebecca, ignoring Victor entirely. "I knew the risks when I made the choice. I just hoped it might help." He began removing his security badge and ID card, placing them carefully on the nearby workbench. "Wait," Rebecca said suddenly, her voice carrying the authority that had built her company from nothing. "Victor, I need to see his personnel file. Complete background check, education verification, everything." Victor looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Rebecca, we're not hiring him. We're firing him, possibly having him arrested." But Rebecca was already pulling up the employee database on her phone, scrolling through Marcus's information with growing amazement. There, buried in the standard HR forms, was the education section she'd overlooked earlier. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Ph.D. in Nuclear Engineering, graduated 2015. Dissertation title, Advanced Thermal Management Systems for High-Energy Fusion Reactors. Previous employment, Senior Nuclear Engineer, General Dynamics, 2015 to 2019. Reason for leaving, family medical emergency. "Jesus," Rebecca whispered, staring at the screen. Victor moved to look over her shoulder, his expression shifting from anger to confusion as he read the same information. "This has to be a mistake," Victor muttered. "Background checks would have caught this. Human resources would have flagged someone with these qualifications applying for a janitorial position." Marcus watched their exchange with the weary expression of someone who'd had this conversation before. "Your background check was focused on criminal history and basic employment verification," he said quietly. "They didn't dig into education details for a maintenance position, and honestly, after being turned down for engineering jobs because of my employment gap, I learned to downplay my qualifications when applying for service positions." Rebecca looked at this man she'd completely misjudged, seeing him clearly for the first time. The careful way he moved through the building, the respectful distance he maintained from everyone, the invisible efficiency with which he performed his duties. He wasn't just a janitor who'd stumbled onto classified information. He was a brilliant engineer who'd been hiding in plain sight. sacrificing his career for family responsibilities that no one had bothered to understand. "Victor," she said slowly, her mind already working through possibilities, "I think we need to reconsider our response to this situation." Victor's face darkened with frustration. "Rebecca, I don't care if he has 10 PhDs. He committed corporate espionage. The board expects decisive action." But Rebecca was remembering her father's advice about trusting instincts while verifying facts. The facts were now clear. Marcus Thompson was exactly who he claimed to be, a devoted father who'd sacrificed everything for love and was slowly suffocating under the weight of his unused talents. "What if," Rebecca said carefully, "instead of firing him, we offered him the position he's actually qualified for?" The suggestion hung in the air like a live wire, crackling with implications that neither Victor nor Marcus seemed prepared to address. "You can't be serious," Victor said, his voice tight with disbelief. "After what he's done, you want to reward him with a promotion?" Rebecca turned to face Marcus, studying his expression carefully. "Mr. Thompson," she said formally, "would you be interested in joining our engineering team? Senior level, competitive salary, full benefits. Your daughter's asthma treatments would be covered under our executive health plan." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, as if processing an offer too good to be real. He began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "Miss Martinez, I appreciate the offer, but I violated your trust. Your security protocols. I understand if you can't overlook that." Rebecca felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of the rare kind of integrity that couldn't be faked or learned. "You violated protocols to solve a problem that was stopping us from potentially revolutionizing clean energy," she replied. "Your methods were questionable, but your motives were pure, and honestly, your solution might save us months of development time and millions in research costs." Victor made a sound of frustration, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the board. This decision needs unanimous approval, and I can guarantee you won't get it." As he stepped away to make his call, Rebecca found herself alone with Marcus again, the weight of the moment settling between them. "Why?" Marcus asked quietly. "Why are you willing to take this risk for someone you barely know?" Rebecca considered the question, thinking about the path that had brought her to this moment. "Because," she said finally, "I know what it's like to be underestimated. To have your capabilities dismissed because of circumstances beyond your control. And because Emma deserves to have a father who's using his talents to their fullest potential." At the mention of his daughter, Marcus's composure finally cracked slightly, and Rebecca saw the raw gratitude in his eyes. "She's been asking me lately if I'm smart," he said, his voice barely audible. "Her friends' parents are doctors and lawyers and engineers, and she wants to understand why Daddy cleans floors instead of building rockets, like in her picture books." Rebecca's heart clenched at the image of a 7-year-old trying to reconcile her father's obvious intelligence with his circumstances. "What do you tell her?" she asked gently. Marcus smiled, the first genuinely happy expression she'd seen from him. "I tell her that every job is important if you do it with pride and kindness, but lately I've been wondering if I'm teaching her to settle for less than she's capable of." The honesty in his admission struck Rebecca profoundly, reminding her of her own father's lessons about the difference between humility and self-diminishment. Victor returned, his expression grim. "Emergency board meeting in 20 minutes. They want to discuss your proposal, though Sandra is already calling it corporate suicide." He looked between Rebecca and Marcus with obvious frustration. "Rebecca, I understand you want to do the right thing, but this sets a dangerous precedent. Employees can't just decide to access classified files, no matter how good their intentions." "You're absolutely right," Rebecca agreed, surprising him. "Which is why Mr. Thompson's first project will be developing new security protocols to prevent exactly this kind of situation in the future." Marcus looked up sharply, understanding dawning in his expression. "You want me to fix the vulnerability I exploited," he said, and Rebecca could hear the respect in his voice for the elegant solution. "Design a system that allows for collaboration while maintaining security." Rebecca nodded, feeling the pieces of her plan clicking into place. "Exactly. Who better to design security against unauthorized access than someone who's demonstrated exactly how it can be breached?" Victor stared at them both as if they'd lost their minds, but Rebecca could see the strategic thinking behind his frustration. "The board will never approve this," he warned. "Sandra's already talking about liability issues, and the other board members are concerned about our reputation if this gets out." Rebecca straightened, feeling the familiar surge of determination that had carried her through every major challenge in her career. "Then it's a good thing I still hold controlling interest in this company," she replied with quiet confidence. "The board can advise, but this decision is ultimately mine to make." The elevator ride to the executive floor was tense, with Victor checking his phone repeatedly while Marcus stood silently, still wearing his janitor's uniform, in a building where he might soon be leading engineering projects. As they entered the boardroom, Rebecca could feel the hostility radiating from the assembled board members. Sandra Williams looked like she was already composing the legal briefs that would be needed if this decision went badly, while the other directors whispered among themselves with obvious concern. "Gentlemen, Sandra," Rebecca began, taking her position at the head of the table, "I want to introduce you to Dr. Marcus Thompson, our new senior nuclear engineer." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. "Rebecca," Sandra said carefully, her lawyer's training evident in every measured word, "we need to discuss the liability implications of this decision. If it becomes known that we've promoted someone who committed corporate espionage." Rebecca held up a hand, cutting off the objection. "Dr. Thompson didn't commit espionage," she said firmly. "He identified a critical flaw in our security protocols and demonstrated exactly how unauthorized access could occur. Now he's going to help us fix those vulnerabilities while also contributing his considerable expertise to our clean energy projects." Marcus stepped forward slightly, his voice steady despite the obvious tension in the room. "I take full responsibility for my actions," he said. "I violated trust, and I understand your concerns about security, but I want you to know that everything I did was motivated by a desire to contribute, not to steal or sabotage." "And we're supposed to just take your word for that?" Sandra asked, her tone skeptical but not entirely hostile. Marcus met her gaze directly. "No," he replied simply. "You're supposed to judge me by my work, my integrity, and my commitment to this company's mission. I believe in what Apex is trying to accomplish. Clean, sustainable energy could change the world, and I want to be part of that solution." Victor leaned forward, his expression still troubled. "Dr. Thompson, help us understand. You have a PhD from MIT. You've worked on cutting-edge fusion technology. Yet you've been cleaning our offices for 2 years. Why didn't you apply for an engineering position initially?" The question hung in the air, and Rebecca realized that this was the moment that would determine whether the board would support her decision. Marcus took a deep breath before answering. "After my wife died, I was a single father with a 7-year-old daughter who needed stability above all else," he began. "Engineering positions require long hours, travel, the kind of commitment that would have taken me away from Emma when she needed me most. The janitorial position offered health insurance, regular hours, and the security of knowing I could be there for my daughter." He paused, looking around the table at faces that were beginning to show understanding rather than suspicion. "But Emma is older now, more secure, and she's starting to ask questions about why I'm not using my education. She's incredibly bright, and I realized I was teaching her to hide her intelligence rather than embrace it." Sandra's expression softened slightly. "You have a 7-year-old daughter," she said, and Rebecca heard the shift in her tone toward something almost maternal. "What does she think about your work?" Marcus smiled, the transformation in his features immediate and profound. "She thinks I'm the smartest daddy in the world, but she can't understand why smart people clean floors instead of building spaceships." Last week she asked me if maybe I wasn't as smart as she thought I was. The admission hit the room like a physical blow, and Rebecca saw several board members exchange glances. The image of a brilliant child questioning her father's worth because she couldn't reconcile his intelligence with his circumstances was powerful enough to crack even the most hardened corporate executive. "That must have been difficult to hear," Sandra said quietly, and Marcus nodded. "It was devastating," he admitted, "but it also made me realize that I'd been so focused on providing security for Emma that I'd forgotten to show her what it looks like to pursue your dreams and use your talents fully." Rebecca seized the moment, knowing that the board's resistance was beginning to crumble. "Dr. Thompson's expertise could accelerate our fusion project by months, possibly years. His solution to our thermal dynamics problem is already proving successful, and his security insights could prevent future breaches." "What about the precedent this sets?" Victor asked, though his tone had lost its earlier hostility. "If employees think they can access classified files and be rewarded for it," Marcus addressed the concern directly. "I propose implementing a formal innovation protocol," he said, his voice gaining confidence as he moved into problem-solving mode. "A secure system that allows employees at any level to contribute ideas and observations without compromising classified information. Many of your most innovative insights might be coming from people who see your operations from different perspectives." Rebecca felt a surge of admiration for his strategic thinking. Instead of simply defending his actions, he was proposing solutions that would benefit the entire organization. "That's actually not a bad idea," Sandra mused, her legal mind already working through the implications. "A formal innovation pipeline could protect us legally while also tapping into our full workforce's potential." The discussion continued for another hour, with Marcus answering technical questions about the fusion project and addressing concerns about security and precedent. By the time the formal vote was called, Rebecca could see that the board's initial hostility had evolved into cautious optimism. "All in favor of offering Dr. Thompson a senior engineering position contingent on his development of enhanced security protocols," Rebecca said, raising her own hand. One by one, the other board members followed suit, with Victor being the last to raise his hand with obvious reluctance. "Motion carried," Sandra announced. "Welcome to the engineering team, Dr. Thompson." Marcus looked stunned, as if he couldn't quite believe the rapid transformation from janitor facing termination to senior engineer with the company's full support. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." Rebecca stood, extending her hand to shake his. "I know you won't," she replied. "But first, you need to go home and tell Emma that her daddy is going to start building those spaceships she's been asking about." The smile that spread across Marcus's face was radiant, transforming him from a man beaten down by circumstances into someone who'd rediscovered hope and purpose. As the board meeting dispersed, Rebecca remained behind with Marcus, both of them processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Miss Martinez," Marcus said quietly, "I need you to know that this means everything to me. Not just the job, but the faith you've shown in me when you had every reason to doubt." Rebecca studied his face, seeing in his expression the same determination and integrity that had built her own company. "Dr. Thompson," she replied with a smile, "something tells me this is just the beginning of what you're capable of accomplishing." 2 weeks later, Rebecca stood outside Emma Thompson's elementary school, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her casual sweater. She'd traded her power suits for jeans and a soft blue cardigan, hoping to look approachable for a 7-year-old who didn't yet know her father's life had completely changed. Marcus had asked her to pick up Emma, a simple request that felt momentous. "Miss Martinez?" a small voice asked, and Rebecca turned to find the most beautiful child she'd ever seen. Emma Thompson had her father's intelligent dark eyes and careful way of observing, but her smile was pure sunshine, unguarded and trusting in a way that made Rebecca's chest tighten. "You must be Emma," Rebecca said, kneeling to the child's level. Your daddy asked me to pick you up today. He's finishing something very important at work. Emma studied Rebecca's face with serious consideration. Are you Daddy's new boss lady? She asked. He said you're very smart and help make energy that doesn't hurt the earth. The innocence combined with obvious pride in Emma's voice when she spoke about her father made Rebecca smile genuinely. I suppose I am his boss lady, Rebecca replied gently. But more importantly, I'm his friend. I've heard wonderful things about you. Emma's face lit up with delight, grabbing Rebecca's hand with casual trust. Daddy says you're helping him build the rockets I've been asking about, Emma announced as they walked toward Rebecca's car. Not space rockets, but the kind that make clean energy so polar bears don't lose their homes. The sophisticated understanding reminded Rebecca that brilliance runs in families. That's exactly right, Rebecca confirmed, helping Emma into her booster seat. Your daddy is one of the smartest people I've ever met, and he's helping us solve very big problems. Emma nodded seriously, then brightened with a child's emotional shifts. Can we get ice cream? She asked hopefully. Daddy usually says yes on Fridays. Rebecca found herself charmed by the logic and her unexpected desire to spoil this remarkable child. During the drive to Apex Engineering, Emma provided commentary on everything they passed. She pointed out favorite buildings, explained why traffic lights were positioned at specific heights, and shared theories about car colors. Daddy taught me that everything has a reason, Emma explained at a red light. Even random things usually follow patterns if you look close enough. Rebecca saw Marcus's analytical mind reflected in his daughter's observations. Your daddy sounds very wise, Rebecca said. He knows everything about science and math, but he's also good at fixing hurt feelings and making dinosaur pancakes, Emma replied confidently. Mommy used to say he had magic hands that could fix anything broken. The mention of Emma's mother created silence, and Rebecca saw how the girl's expression grew thoughtful. Emma's memories of her mother were precious but distant, filtered through Marcus's protective lens. Do you remember your mommy very well? Rebecca asked gently. I remember pieces, Emma said finally, like how she smelled like vanilla and flowers and how she sang Spanish songs while cooking. Daddy has pictures and tells stories, but sometimes I wonder if I'm remembering real things or just his stories. The honesty broke Rebecca's heart. I think your mommy's love lives in all those stories and pictures, Rebecca said carefully, and in how your daddy takes care of you every day. Emma nodded, satisfied. Daddy cries sometimes when he thinks I'm sleeping, she confided, but he always smiles when he sees me, even when his eyes are red. Mrs. Rodriguez says that's what real love looks like. Rebecca felt tears at the image of Marcus grieving privately while maintaining strength for his daughter. At Apex Engineering, Emma's eyes widened at the gleaming lobby. This is where Daddy works now? It's like a glass and metal castle. Rebecca smiled at the apt description. It is a bit like a castle, she agreed. And your daddy is doing very important work here, helping solve puzzles that could help save the world. Like a superhero scientist? Emma asked hopefully. Exactly like a superhero scientist. The engineering floor bustled with activity. Rebecca spotted Marcus hunched over a computer terminal with other engineers, studying complex calculations on multiple screens. Daddy! Emma called out, and Marcus's head snapped up, his face transforming with joy. He crossed the room quickly, scooping Emma up in a hug. Hello, sunshine, he said, using his special name for her. Did you have a good day at school? Emma giggled, whispering something that made him smile, and glanced gratefully at Rebecca. Miss Martinez took me for a car ride, and we talked about everything, Emma announced. She says you're like a superhero scientist now. Marcus's cheeks colored slightly, but his eyes met Rebecca's with gratitude mixed with something deeper. Marcus led them to a conference room where a scale model of the fusion reactor sat surrounded by technical drawings. This is going to make clean energy, he explained patiently. Remember how we talked about the sun making light and heat? This machine does something similar, but safe and controlled. Emma studied the model intensely, her hands tracing components, while Marcus explained each piece's contribution. Rebecca watched, fascinated by how he adapted explanations to Emma's understanding without talking down to her intelligence. The hard part was keeping it from getting too hot, Marcus continued. Like cooking when the stove gets so hot it might burn food, except this gets much, much hotter. So you had to invent a better way to cool it down, Emma concluded, and Marcus beamed with pride. Exactly. And that's where the magic happened. I figured out how to make the cooling system work better, and now the whole machine runs smoothly. Emma clapped with delight. You fixed the broken thing, just like you fixed my bicycle and my stuffed rabbit's arm. Rebecca watched with growing wonder at Marcus's patient, nurturing approach to both fatherhood and engineering. Speaking of fixing things, Marcus said, glancing at Rebecca before returning attention to Emma. I have something important to tell you, Sunshine. Remember how you asked why smart people like Daddy clean floors instead of building rockets? Emma grew serious and nodded. You said every job is important if you do it with kindness, she recited, but I still didn't understand why you weren't using your big brain for big problems. Marcus knelt beside his daughter, taking her hands. Well, Miss Martinez and her team needed someone with exactly the kind of big brain I have. So starting Monday, instead of cleaning floors, I'm going to be building those energy machines we just looked at. Emma's eyes widened. You're going to be a real scientist again? Like in the pictures from before Mommy got sick? Even better, Marcus said softly. I'm going to be a scientist who gets to come home to you every night and tell you about amazing discoveries. Emma launched into her father's arms, and Rebecca turned away to compose herself. Does this mean we don't have to worry about insurance for my asthma medicine? Emma asked with practical awareness that children in difficult circumstances develop too early. Marcus's expression tightened, realizing even his 7-year-old had been aware of financial stress. That's exactly what it means, Marcus assured her emotionally. Miss Martinez's company has wonderful insurance. You never have to worry about that again. Emma turned to Rebecca with solemn gratitude. Thank you for giving my daddy his big brain job back, she said seriously. He's been sad for a long time, even when he pretended not to be. I could tell because he would stare at his old diplomas when he thought I wasn't looking. The observation hit both adults like a physical blow, highlighting Marcus's sacrifices and Emma's perceptiveness to his hidden struggles. Rebecca knelt beside Emma. Emma, your daddy never lost his big brain job. He just had to use it differently to take care of you. Everything he did was him using his intelligence to keep you safe and happy. Emma considered this carefully. Like how he learned to braid my hair even though boys don't usually know how, and figured out which cough medicine worked best, she said with understanding. Exactly like that, Rebecca confirmed. Your daddy is a superhero scientist both at work and at home. Emma beamed at this description. The afternoon progressed with Emma exploring the engineering floor, asking questions that impressed everyone with their sophistication. Rebecca watched Marcus interact with new colleagues, seeing how his leadership abilities and expertise quickly earned respect. As evening approached, Emma had claimed a corner of Marcus's new office, spreading homework on a small table Rebecca had procured. The sight of the girl working on math problems while her father designed revolutionary energy systems created a picture of family integration that felt both natural and profound. Miss Martinez, Emma said during a homework break, can I ask you something personal? The formal phrasing made Rebecca smile, recognizing Marcus's influence. Of course, Emma. Are you going to be Daddy's friend for a long time? She asked seriously. Because he's had work friends before who were nice, until they found out he had to leave early sometimes for my doctor appointments. The question revealed past disappointments that made Rebecca's heart ache. Emma, Rebecca said carefully, I promise your daddy's responsibilities to you will always come first, and anyone who doesn't understand that doesn't deserve to be his friend. Emma studied Rebecca's face intently. Good, she said, satisfied. Because Daddy deserves friends who appreciate how special he is, not people who think taking care of me makes him less good at his job. The wisdom in this perspective left Rebecca speechless. Marcus appeared, having overheard. His expression was soft with gratitude, and something deeper that made Rebecca's pulse quicken unexpectedly. "Ready to go home, sunshine?" he asked Emma. "Miss Martinez, would you like to join us for dinner? Emma's been requesting spaghetti and meatballs, and I make mean marinara sauce from my grandmother's recipe." The casual invitation held deeper significance. "I'd love that," Rebecca said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. The Thompson apartment was a modest two-bedroom space filled with warmth that expensive furnishings couldn't replicate. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator and walls, while bookshelves overflowed with children's literature, mathematics textbooks, and scientific journals. The combination perfectly captured the intellectual curiosity, defining both father and daughter. Dinner preparation became collaborative, with Emma setting the table with mathematical precision, while Marcus cooked and Rebecca handled salad duty. The domestic rhythm felt natural despite being completely foreign to her usual routine. "Miss Martinez," Emma said during dinner, twirling spaghetti carefully, "what did you want to be when you were little?" The question caught Rebecca off guard. "I think I always wanted to build something important that would help people and make the world better," Rebecca replied thoughtfully. "I just wasn't sure what, until I discovered clean energy technology." Emma nodded, as if this made perfect sense. After dinner, Emma demonstrated a school science experiment involving vinegar, baking soda, and food coloring to create an erupting volcano. Rebecca found herself on hands and knees in the kitchen, helping measure ingredients while Marcus provided scientific commentary. "This is how real volcanoes work," Emma explained as colorful foam bubbled out, except with much hotter lava and more dangerous gases. "But the pressure buildup principle is exactly the same." Rebecca marveled at the child's ability to connect simple experiments with complex processes. As bedtime approached, Rebecca found herself reluctant to leave the warmth and authenticity of their apartment. The contrast with her solitary evenings was stark. "Could you read me one story?" Emma asked hopefully. "I want to hear how you would do the voices." Rebecca glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. The story Emma selected was about a girl who wanted to be an astronaut. Rebecca found herself fully invested in bringing characters to life with different voices. Emma listened with rapt attention, offering suggestions that showed remarkable literary sophistication. When the story ended, Emma hugged Rebecca spontaneously. "Thank you for reading to me," she whispered, "and thank you for being Daddy's friend and giving him his important job back." As Rebecca said goodnight and joined Marcus in the living room, she felt fundamentally changed. The simple pleasures of family dinner, science experiments, and bedtime stories had revealed dimensions of happiness she'd never considered pursuing. "She's extraordinary," Rebecca said softly, settling beside Marcus. "Her intelligence, emotional maturity, curiosity about everything. You've done an incredible job with her." Marcus smiled with particular pride. "She's been my teacher as much as I've been hers," he replied. "Losing Maria forced me to become the parent Emma needed, but Emma taught me what kind of person I wanted to be. Everything good about who I am now comes from trying to be worthy of her love." The honesty created profound connection, and Rebecca realized she was falling for not just Marcus, but for the extraordinary life he'd built with his daughter. The package deal that might seem complicated to others felt like the missing piece she hadn't known she was searching for. 3 months later, Rebecca's world came crashing down during what should have been Apex Engineering's greatest triumph. The fusion reactor prototype had been performing flawlessly, generating clean energy at unprecedented efficiency levels. Government contracts worth billions were being finalized, and industry publications were hailing their breakthrough as revolutionary. Then Victor Chen walked into her office with a manila folder that would change everything. "Rebecca, we have a problem," Victor said, his usual corporate composure replaced by barely controlled panic. "A big problem." He placed the folder on her desk with the careful precision of someone handling radioactive material. Our friends at Meridian Industries have been doing some digging into our recent personnel changes. Rebecca felt her stomach drop as she opened the folder. Inside were photographs, financial records, and what appeared to be a comprehensive investigation into Marcus Thompson's background. But these weren't the sanitized employment verification documents they'd relied on 3 months ago. These were deep background checks, the kind that uncovered every detail of a person's life, including things Marcus had never shared. They're claiming Marcus is an industrial spy, Victor continued, his voice tight with barely restrained anger. According to their research, he was approached by General Dynamics 18 months ago about returning to his former position. They're alleging he turned down the offer because he was already working undercover for a competitor. Rebecca stared at the documents, her hands trembling slightly as she processed the implications. "That's impossible," she said, her voice sounding hollow even to herself. "Marcus has been nothing but honest with us. He solved our thermal dynamics problem out of genuine desire to contribute." "Look at page 12, Victor said grimly. Rebecca flipped to the indicated page and found herself staring at bank records showing a series of deposits into Marcus's account, each one substantial enough to raise questions about their source. "These deposits," Rebecca whispered, her throat constricting as she studied the figures. "They're significant amounts. Where did this money come from?" Victor leaned forward, his expression a mixture of frustration and something that might have been pity. "That's what Meridian is asking," he replied. "Their investigation suggests the deposits coincide perfectly with Marcus's hiring and his subsequent access to our classified fusion reactor designs. They're preparing to go public with allegations of corporate espionage unless we take immediate action." Rebecca felt the room spinning slightly as she tried to reconcile the evidence with everything she thought she knew about Marcus. The man who read bedtime stories to his daughter with such tenderness, who spoke about his late wife with reverence and grief, who had sacrificed his career for family responsibilities. Could that same man be capable of elaborate deception and betrayal? "There has to be an explanation," she said, but even to herself, the words sounded desperate rather than confident. Marcus wouldn't do this. He has Emma to think about, his reputation, his integrity. None of this makes sense. Victor's expression softened slightly, suggesting he wasn't entirely unsympathetic to her position. "Rebecca, I know you've grown close to him and his daughter. We all have. Emma is a remarkable child, and Marcus has been an exemplary employee these past 3 months. But the evidence is compelling, and Meridian has resources to make this very public very quickly." The thought of Emma learning about these allegations made Rebecca feel physically ill. The 7-year-old who had finally seen her father reclaim his professional identity and dignity would be devastated by suggestions that his success was built on deception and theft. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" Rebecca asked, trying to shift into damage control mode despite the emotional turmoil threatening to overwhelm her analytical capabilities. "They want a response within 48 hours, Victor replied. "Either we terminate Marcus immediately and cooperate with their investigation, or they go public with the espionage allegations. They're also threatening to contact federal authorities about potential violations of the Economic Espionage Act." Rebecca closed the folder, unable to look at the damning evidence any longer. "I need to talk to Marcus," she said quietly. "Before we make any decisions, I need to hear his side of this." Victor nodded, though his expression suggested he thought her loyalty was misplaced. "I'll arrange for a private meeting," he agreed. "But Rebecca, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that everything we thought we knew about Marcus Thompson might be wrong." That evening, Rebecca found herself sitting across from Marcus in the same conference room, where they'd first discussed his transition from janitor to engineer. But the atmosphere now was charged with suspicion and heartbreak rather than hope and possibility. Marcus had arrived still wearing his work clothes, having been called away from helping Emma with her homework. "Rebecca," he said, his voice carrying a note of concern as he took in her obvious distress, "Victor said you needed to see me urgently. Is everything all right with the project?" The genuine worry in his expression made what she had to do even more painful. "Marcus," she began, her voice carefully controlled, "I need to ask you some difficult questions, and I need completely honest answers." She placed the manila folder on the table between them, watching as recognition and then alarm flashed across his features. "Someone has been investigating your background," she continued, opening the folder to reveal the financial records. "They found bank deposits that are difficult to explain, and they're alleging that you've been working as an industrial spy." Marcus stared at the documents, his face going pale as he processed the implications. "Industrial spy," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Rebecca, you can't seriously believe that I would." He trailed off, seeming to realize how the evidence must look to someone who didn't know the full story. "I don't want to believe it," Rebecca replied, her voice breaking slightly. "But I need you to explain these deposits. Where did this money come from?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his internal struggle with difficult emotions. "The deposits," he said finally. "They're from Maria's life insurance policy. After she died, there were several delayed payments, survivor benefits, things that took months or sometimes years to process." He looked directly at Rebecca, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I deposited them as they came in, trying to build a college fund for Emma while also managing our day-to-day expenses." The explanation was reasonable, even logical, but Rebecca found herself studying his face for any sign of deception. 3 months of growing trust and deepening feelings had been shattered by a folder full of suspicious coincidences and circumstantial evidence. "Marcus," she said carefully, "why didn't you mention these payments during your background check? Financial windfalls during the hiring process are exactly the kind of thing that raises red flags in security investigations." Marcus's expression shifted to one of hurt surprise, as if he hadn't expected her to question his integrity so directly. "Because," he replied, his voice gaining strength, "my wife's death and the financial aftermath aren't things I discuss casually. Those payments represent the worst period of my life, and I've tried to move forward without dwelling on the details of insurance settlements and survivor benefits." The raw pain in his voice was either completely authentic, or he was a better actor than Rebecca had ever imagined. She wanted desperately to believe him, but the weight of potential consequences for both their company and their personal relationship made trust feel like a luxury she couldn't afford. "There's more," she said reluctantly, turning to another page in the folder. "Meridian Industries claims they have evidence that you were approached by General Dynamics about returning to your former position. They're suggesting that you turned down the offer because you were already committed to stealing our technology." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from hurt to something approaching anger. "General Dynamics did contact me," he admitted, "about 6 months before I was hired here. They offered me a position, good salary, excellent benefits, but I turned it down because Emma was finally stable in her school and her friendship groups. I didn't want to disrupt her life for my career advancement." "Why didn't you tell us about this contact during the hiring process?" Rebecca pressed, hating herself for the interrogation, but knowing that every detail mattered now. "Because," Marcus said, his voice growing colder, "I was applying for an engineering position, not a security clearance with the CIA. I didn't think every job offer I'd received or declined was relevant to my qualifications for working on your fusion project." The logical explanation only made Rebecca feel worse about having to question him, but she knew that Meridian Industries and potentially federal investigators would be far less sympathetic to reasonable explanations that hadn't been documented properly. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I want to believe you. I need you to know that. But this investigation is going to go public, and once it does, the court of public opinion won't care about reasonable explanations or extenuating circumstances." Marcus studied her face for a long moment, and she could see the exact moment he realized that their professional relationship and whatever personal connection had been developing between them was about to be destroyed by forces beyond their control. "What are you saying, Rebecca?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Are you firing me?" The direct question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that extended far beyond employment status. "I don't know," Rebecca admitted, her professional composure finally cracking. "The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss our options. Meridian is threatening to go public with espionage allegations unless we take immediate action. If this becomes a scandal, it could destroy everything we've built." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression settling into the resigned acceptance she remembered from their first meeting in the janitorial supply room. "And Emma," he said quietly. "What happens to Emma when her classmates' parents read about her father being accused of corporate espionage?" The question hit Rebecca like a physical blow, forcing her to confront the human cost of the business decision she was contemplating. Emma, who had finally seen her father reclaim his professional dignity, who had started telling friends about her superhero scientist daddy, would be devastated by public accusations regardless of their ultimate validity. "I don't know," Rebecca whispered, tears threatening despite her efforts to maintain professional composure. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this to happen." "Neither did I," Marcus replied, standing slowly as if preparing to leave. "But I guess that's the difference between us. I thought we were building something together, something that could benefit everyone. You're still thinking about protecting your business interests." The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to be painful. Rebecca was thinking about business interests, about protecting her company and her employees and her professional reputation. But she was also thinking about Emma, about the life Marcus had rebuilt, about the love she'd been afraid to acknowledge even to herself. "That's not fair," she said, standing as well. "I'm thinking about everyone who could be hurt by this, including you and Emma. If we don't handle this correctly, you could face federal charges. Emma could lose her father to a prison sentence." Marcus paused at the door, turning back to face her one last time. "Rebecca," he said, his voice soft with disappointment. 3 months ago you took a chance on a janitor who had made a mistake. You looked past the evidence and chose to trust your instincts about who I really was. I'm asking you to do that again now." After he left, Rebecca sat alone in the conference room, staring at the folder that had upended her life. Everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and risk was being tested by circumstances that seemed designed to force impossible choices. The board meeting the next morning was as contentious as Rebecca had expected. Victor had prepared a comprehensive damage control strategy that involved immediately terminating Marcus and cooperating fully with any investigation. Sandra Williams, the legal counsel, had drafted statements that would distance the company from any wrongdoing while emphasizing their commitment to security and proper hiring procedures. "The evidence is circumstantial," Rebecca argued, though she could hear the desperation in her own voice. "But the timing and financial records create reasonable doubt about Marcus's motivations. We could be destroying an innocent man's life based on speculation and coincidence." "Rebecca," Sandra replied with the patience of someone explaining obvious facts to a stubborn child, "in corporate law, reasonable doubt is a luxury we can't afford. If federal investigators become involved, our cooperation or lack thereof will be scrutinized extensively. We need to demonstrate that we take security breaches seriously." "What security breach?" Rebecca demanded. "Marcus solved our thermodynamics problem using knowledge he already possessed. He didn't steal our technology, he improved it using his expertise and experience." Victor leaned forward, his expression sympathetic but firm. "The problem isn't what Marcus did or didn't do," he said. "The problem is how it looks to outside investigators and potential clients. In the defense contracting world, even the appearance of impropriety can be fatal to business relationships." The discussion continued for hours, with Rebecca fighting for Marcus's position, while the rest of the board gradually aligned behind Victor's recommendations for immediate termination. Finally, when it became clear that her arguments weren't swaying anyone, Rebecca played her last card. "I'm calling an emergency shareholder meeting," she announced, using her authority as majority owner to override the board's recommendation. "This decision is too important to rush, and I want input from everyone with a financial stake in this company." The shareholder meeting, held that afternoon, brought together investors, major clients, and key employees in the largest conference room at Apex Engineering. Rebecca had spent her lunch hour preparing not just financial projections and legal strategies, but also the most important presentation of her professional life. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, standing at the front of the room with the confidence that had built her company from nothing, "3 months ago, we hired Dr. Marcus Thompson as a senior nuclear engineer. In that time, he has solved our most significant technical challenge, improved our reactor efficiency by 37%, and helped us secure contracts worth billions of dollars." She clicked to the next slide, showing project timelines and performance metrics that demonstrated Marcus's contributions. "Now we're being asked to fire him based on allegations that have no concrete evidence, no proof of wrongdoing, and no actual damage to our company or our technology." Murmurs rippled through the room as shareholders processed the information. Rebecca continued, knowing this might be her only chance to save not just Marcus's job, but the integrity of her own decision-making process. "The question before us today isn't whether Dr. Thompson is guilty of industrial espionage," she said, her voice gaining strength as she found her rhythm. "The question is whether we're the kind of company that destroys people's lives based on speculation and fear, or whether we stand by our employees when they're facing unsubstantiated attacks." She clicked to a final slide showing a photograph of Marcus and Emma taken during a company picnic the previous month. In the image, Emma was demonstrating a science experiment to a group of fascinated adults while Marcus watched with obvious pride and love. "This is Dr. Marcus Thompson and his 7-year-old daughter Emma," Rebecca said, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "Everything Marcus has done, every sacrifice he's made, every risk he's taken, has been motivated by his desire to provide for this child and to contribute meaningfully to work that matters." The room was completely silent now, with even Victor and Sandra listening intently to her words. "If we fire Marcus based on these allegations, we're not just ending his employment, we're destroying a little girl's faith in her father and teaching her that success can be taken away by people who prioritize appearances over truth." Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead fusion specialist who had worked closely with Marcus, stood up from her seat in the middle of the room. "I'd like to say something," she announced, her voice clear and determined. "Dr. Thompson's contributions to our project have been extraordinary, but more than that, his character and integrity are evident in everything he does. I've seen him prioritize Emma's needs over work demands, and I've seen him give credit to junior engineers for ideas that were partially his own." One by one, other employees began standing and sharing their observations about Marcus's character, work ethic, and commitment to both his professional responsibilities and his role as a father. The testimonials created a picture of a man whose integrity was evident in countless small interactions and decisions. Finally, Rebecca called for a vote. "All those in favor of retaining Dr. Thompson and fighting these allegations," she said, raising her own hand and watching as hands rose throughout the room. When the count was complete, Marcus's supporters had prevailed by a significant margin. "The motion passes," Rebecca announced, feeling a mixture of relief and determination. "We stand by our employee and we fight." After the meeting, Rebecca drove directly to Marcus's apartment, knowing that he'd been waiting all day to learn his fate. She found him in the small playground behind his building, pushing Emma on a swing while both of them tried to pretend that everything was normal. "Miss Rebecca!" Emma called out when she spotted her, jumping off the swing and running over for a hug. "Daddy said you had to go to lots of boring meetings today. Did you solve all the grown-up problems?" Rebecca knelt down to Emma's level, seeing in the child's eyes the trust and affection that had developed between them over the past months. "I think we solved the most important ones," she replied, glancing at Marcus, who was approaching with cautious hope in his expression. "The board voted to retain your position," Rebecca told him directly. "We're going to fight these allegations and clear your name completely." Marcus's relief was visible, his shoulders relaxing as the weight of potential unemployment and scandal lifted from him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I know this wasn't an easy decision, and I know you took risks to support me." Rebecca stood moving closer to him while Emma played nearby, finally ready to address the personal implications of everything that had happened. "Marcus," she said softly, "I'm sorry I doubted you, even for a moment. I should have trusted my instincts about who you are, instead of letting fear and evidence drive my decisions." Marcus reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with the familiarity of someone who had been hoping for exactly this conversation. "You were protecting your company and your employees," he replied. "I understand that. But I also need you to understand that Emma and I come as a package deal. If you're going to be part of our lives, you need to trust us even when things look complicated." Rebecca looked at Emma, who was now hanging upside down from the monkey bars with the fearless confidence of childhood, and felt her heart make a decision that her head had been afraid to acknowledge. "I want to be part of your lives," she said clearly. "Both of your lives, for as long as you'll have me." Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his entire face with hope and love. "Emma," he called to his daughter, "come here for a minute. Miss Rebecca has something important to tell us." Emma dropped from the monkey bars and skipped over, her face bright with curiosity and excitement. "Are you going to be part of our family now?" she asked Rebecca directly, with the uncomplicated directness that only children could bring to life's most important questions. "Because I've been hoping you would want to stay with us forever." Rebecca felt tears of joy, replacing the tears of fear and uncertainty she'd been fighting all day. "Yes, Emma," she said, pulling both Marcus and his daughter into a hug that felt like coming home. "I want to stay with you forever." 6 months later, at Emma's 8th birthday party, held in the beautifully redesigned conference room at Apex Engineering, Rebecca stood watching her new family celebrate with friends and colleagues. The fusion reactor project had been completed successfully, with Marcus receiving recognition from the scientific community for his innovative thermal dynamics solutions. The allegations from Meridian Industries had been thoroughly investigated and dismissed, with the FBI determining that all of Marcus's financial records were completely legitimate insurance settlements. The attempted corporate sabotage had actually strengthened Apex Engineering's reputation and positioned them as industry leaders in both technological innovation and employee loyalty. "Daddy, Miss Rebecca," Emma called out, using the title she'd insisted on maintaining even after Rebecca had become a permanent part of their family. "Come help me blow out the candles." As they stood together, Marcus's arm around Rebecca's waist and Emma beaming between them, Rebecca reflected on how much her definition of success had changed. Building a billion-dollar company had been rewarding, but building a family with Marcus and Emma had taught her what true fulfillment actually meant. Sometimes the most important decisions required not just business acumen, but the courage to trust love over fear, relationship over reputation, and the wisdom of a 7-year-old over the skepticism of corporate boards. "Make a wish, sunshine," Marcus said to Emma, but Rebecca was already living hers.